before we get going, give us an introduction of who you are so that the audience knows a little bit about you, and then we'll get into some questions.
My name is Boyd. I should have been the center fielder for the New York Yankees, but instead I decided to get into real estate. Uh, no, I got into real estate on accident when I was in college. Started leasing homes and made a career out of it. Mike and Mandy, it's been 30 years now that I've been involved in selling real estate or operating in the real estate industry in Salt Lake. So I moved to Salt Lake thinking I was going to stay here for a year before I went back to get my MBA after I graduated from college. And I had a real estate license when I was in Massachusetts, and got into residential sales in 1995 right here in Salt Lake. And I never felt like it was going to be a career, but I fell in love with it. I was lucky enough to be surrounded by some cool mentors, and I fell in love with sales. I had some great teachers and mentors in sales, and I got to embrace being a salesperson and all the opportunities that came with that, and how much learning was involved in that. And I also luckily my first broker was a great mentor about owning stuff. He owned a bunch of real estate, and I was exposed to that at an early age. The office that I first worked at was on the third floor, and people at the end of every month and the beginning of every month, people would get out of that elevator or to hear the elevator ding, and they'd come in and hand a check to the front desk. And it made a huge impression on me as in my early 20s that, owning stuff and collecting rents is a pretty good deal. So I started paying attention to that guy, Kyle, at the time, mentor, and he just had a real passion for owning things. And over the years, I've gotten to own some businesses. I've owned some investment properties, and I think it's in my DNA being an entrepreneur, owning things. And I've been in the real estate industry in some form or another for my whole adult life right here in Salt Lake City.
So it was sort of that story of you hearing that elevator go off and seeing those checks come in. That was the moment it started to click for you uh, as a salesperson, as a business person of, okay, you could actually make something of this. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it took a little while, like for that to really sink in, but I was watching that and I hadn't really hadn't put all the pieces together. And I think the big thing, Mike, at that point, hadn't committed to this was going to be my career, but I thought, well, that's pretty neat. And it had an impression on me. And then I think I was really terrible at sales. I mean, I was a slow start rookie. I went to all the classes, drank all the coffee in the office, but I was kind of failure to launch for a while. So there wasn't a lot of evidence that I was going to be very productive right away. And it took me until, about 5 or 6 months in before I finally got a deal and started building some confidence. And then at some point between then and the end of my first year, I had that moment of, hey, I actually like this. Maybe I can get over the challenges that I have, the reasons why I'm not successful so far. And so that impression probably didn't have as much of an impact on me until I started getting a little confidence, selling some real estate and saying, hey, because at that point, I couldn't make the connection between where I was sitting there trying to figure out how to sell one house to being able to buy and build a portfolio. But once I started getting a little traction and being exposed to real estate and sort of the passion I had for real estate and getting a little bit of success, and getting some commissions, I thought, man, I can kind of use some of my commission towards investing. And, it took a minute to get that rolling. And early in my career, Mike, like I said, I was just kind of passing through. I thought I was going to go back to college and I was going to be something else. I didn't have a design on being a productive sales guy or a landlord at
What
that
what
point
did you
in
think you
life.
were going to be, Boyd? Out of curiosity.
Well, I mentioned center fielder of the Yanks, right?
Yeah,
So
that
I
was the plan.
no, that really wasn't the plan, but I had an environmental policy, kind of a liberal arts degree, and I had still had some interest in policy. My thought was to go back and get an MBA, and I thought the direction I would go was some sort of consulting around policy or environmental regulations.
Interesting.
And I don't know how I came up with those ideas. I think it was the coolest looking textbooks or the group I like to hang with in college. But knowing myself now, and that's been part of the process, is I am an entrepreneur. I think like an entrepreneur. I think I had that ever since I was a child. And you know, again, it took me a while to kind of really discover that passion. And it's crazy that I even had the idea that I would go, try to position myself to be an employee somewhere.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The reason I had to ask Boyd is because if you were here in the Utah, the Salt Lake City market, your name pops up everywhere, very much real estate related. So it was interesting to
Yep.
me that that's not what you thought you were going to do with your life
Yeah. I think it's a
originally.
good lesson for young people. I've got some children now who are entering adulthood and they're kind of struggling with that. What am I going to be? What should I do? And again, one of the things I'd like to talk to you guys about is just really one, understanding what you're good at, unique ability. And two is, if they're lucky, they'll find something that they're passionate about that they will want to continue to grow and engage in. And that's what happened to me. And I think in some ways it was just pure dumb luck that I happened to get into real estate when I was in college, kind of on accident. And so that translated. I was looking for work. Well, I was going to basically stay here for a ski season. So it was the first thing I thought of is calling to interview. I got a bartending job and I called real estate. Those were the two basic job skills other than the construction that I knew. Um, and I didn't want to do more construction.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that, hey, like being an entrepreneur is something that you were doing even in your younger years. So I just envisioning Boyd Brown back east doing lemonade stands or mowing lawns. I mean, did you start like in that type of grassroots type thing?
Yeah, I mean, I always had jobs. I liked having my own money. So I grew up on a farm, and as a kid, I would go. I mean, this is probably breaking every child labor law that there is now, but I guess statute of limitations is okay. But I would go to the neighboring farm during hay season, and they would just work me from sun up until sundown. And that was I was a bit of a latchkey kid, and it worked out well for my parents because they knew where I was, and I was staying out of trouble.
Yeah.
And I don't know how
And you
much
were
I got
tired. You
paid.
didn't have any energy to get in
I
trouble.
think I got paid like $5 a week for slinging hay bales most of the summer on the farm next door. And so from there, I did get into, again, we were redneck and farmers, and my dad helped me buy some piglets when I was like third or fourth grade, and we raised those. So I had the responsibility of feeding them. And ultimately, you know how the story ends with raising pigs is they go to the butcher and there's some revenue that comes in.
Yep.
And then my dad taught me the lesson. This was a great business lesson. I thought I was loaded, like I was ready to go buy a new bike. And he's like, now we got to go to the feed store and pay for all the feed you've been consuming for the last 9 months. And so I got to learn the difference in gross and net. Again, that was but a lesson early. So that was entrepreneurial. But then I always had paper routes and things like that. I just got used to having my own money and jobs when I was young.
Yeah, I think most of the entrepreneurs that we come in contact with um, have different stories, but some of the same principles of learning early on I guess the lessons around money or budgeting or what money can do. Um, and I just think that lesson that your dad taught you of, and what you perceived from gross versus net, I've got to imagine that has stuck with you either directly or indirectly since then.
It is, and it's a lesson I keep learning, Mike. I mean, it's unbelievable. Early in real estate, you know this. Most of us, by the time we list a house, we've already spent the money. And then, 6 months later, when we get paid on it, we've got to pay our bills and learn how to manage that. But that was a good early lesson. And again, the way the world works for me is, you get these lessons at different levels over and over again. And, Gary Keller, who's sort of been a mentor of mine that I've learned a lot from, he talks about lead with revenue, and that's that same idea is like don't always you can't spend every dollar that you feel like is coming in as revenue, and that's I had to continue to learn that lesson over and over in my early 20s and 30s as I was growing in my business.
Yeah. So question, because you haven't actually touched on, Boyd, all of the things that you do. You say real estate.
Yep.
That's a very broad stroke. Can you talk to our listeners about, because you have a lot of projects, right? You run brokerages, you have properties, you have lots of things going on. When I say everybody in this valley knows your name, there's a reason. Can you talk about some of the projects that you have going?
Yeah, yes. Some of it is I have varied interests, but again, I like owning things, and it took me a while to understand that. So I am the operating principal. I was the founding partner of 4 of the Keller Williams offices here in town, and at different levels had an opportunity to be involved from ground up on those. Um, and it continued to be involved in that quite heavily as a majority owner of 3 of the 4 offices that I was initially involved in, which spans, I think at our height, we're at about 1,300 agents, um, counting the Utah County office and the 3 in Salt Lake. I think we're at about 1,100 right now as the market's contracted a little bit. So I'm involved in that. I do still have a real estate practice. So I do less and less transactions, but more surgical where I'm have a business where I sell land to a specific group of buyers, mostly builders and developers. And I've been involved in doing that for probably 15 years, and I really love that. I'm passionate about that. It's something I enjoy, and it's as I got into ownership of the brokerages, I realized I wanted to pivot away from selling houses so that I wasn't a competing broker owner. I just found like it was a much healthier relationship with our top producers. They enjoyed me being able to coach them and support them, and there was a little bit more open sharing of information when they didn't feel like I was going to try to somehow be at the same kitchen table trying to take a listing and stuff. So I made that commitment pretty early on as an owner. Once I got into ownership of brokerages to sort of specialize more with the land and commercial as opposed to residential, but I did sell residential for the first probably 10 years of my career.
Okay.
And so then in addition to that, I consider myself an investor. So I've been buying residential real estate pretty consistently since I got into real estate. And just kind of like the Monopoly game, I've traded some junky little houses into some bigger properties and been able to transition into some commercial properties. And again, the land development is something I'm passionate about. I've been brokering subdivisions, but I also now buy and develop subdivisions, and we do keep some of those. Some of that is for sale. We'll sell to builders, but we also try to we're creating value so we can build new assets, new commercial properties, multifamily, things like that, with the through our development company, which is we've labeled that and branded it as Grow Development. I've sort of been doing development for 20 years in the Valley, a little bit quietly. And we came out full steam and branded this company, Grow Development. I've got a partner, Jake Hone, on that. And that is a business that we're really focused on. We've got a 25-year plan on that one and really excited about that. And the lessons I've learned in running Keller Williams offices or my brokerage business, I mean, most of them translate and are valuable and allow me to be able to operate multiple businesses, like you mentioned, Mandy.
Yeah, which is
And when you say
impressive.
people know me, I think it may not
Seriously,
be
I
particularly
hear your name
because I'm
everywhere,
that
Boyd.
good. It's just I've been around a long time. If you're just consistent and stay in an industry, and I love hearing you say that. It's a compliment to me, and I think it's, it stands to the grind like we're talking about. It's just hanging in there. There's
Yeah.
been ups and downs, and I think people will know me as being consistent, that I've been around. I've never probably been the fastest one in the race over the last 30 years, but I just keep moving
Stable and
forward,
steady.
doing new things,
Yeah.
and then you look up and time goes by and people recognize your name. So
Yeah, totally. So I will tell you, every organization I think has like the dad of the organization. And I watch you in the Keller Williams cost centers, and you're kind of a dad. What have you learned about culture and creating that family dynamic? Because if you walk into any one of your cost centers, there is a very much a family feel to them. There's a collaboration that goes on. Where did that come from? What did you learn while trying to build that?
Well, that's a good question, Mandy. I've got to probably defer a lot of the credit on that to probably two people, and one is Gary Keller as sort of the visionary, and some of the lessons in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book and his thoughts on business. Gary built his organization by succeeding through others. And by putting the right people in as he expanded his company from one brokerage in Austin, Texas, he made a real decision that he didn't want to be on the road and sort of managing the growth of this as Keller Williams went across the United States. And so he had to give up some control by hiring the history of the company hired Mo Anderson to start the expansion. But there were a lot of other key people that he hired to allow that to happen. And so I was exposed to that and his business philosophy pretty early on, and really watching him allow others to grow and succeed and to help do things. Gary's personality is not such, maybe like mine, that it's not all warm and fuzzy. And so the fact that he built as big a company as he did, about, the caring culture and the cooperative culture. I'm not sure that people would label Gary like that, uh, just naturally when he gets up in the morning. So it's very strategic and smart the way he's done that business. So I was exposed to that when I first got involved with the Keller Williams franchise. And then someone you guys both know is Lee Stern. She was one of the key hires we made very early on. And I didn't even know of Lee Stern when people said, "Oh my gosh, I heard Lee Stern is coming." I'm like, "Well, big deal. Who's Lee Stern?" And she saw me on a golf course. She knew who I was. I didn't know who she did. And she came marching up to me. She says, "I heard you don't know who I am. I think it's time we meet. I understand we're getting in business together." Who is this bossy broad? But I mean, she's the best thing that ever happened to the franchise here, because you say I'm like a dad, like Lee always was, that motherly figure for our company to help us initially build the culture. And it wasn't, and a lot of people can be thought of as motherly or fatherly and culture, but not have the skill set to drive systems
Yeah.
and have the pure push of someone like a Gary or Lee to push things forward. So most of the credit goes to those two, Gary being the visionary of how he set up the company. And for us here in Utah, I got to see Lee Stern model that behavior very early. And I don't know that I was naturally wired that way when I first got into the sales business. A lot of my sales training early was go get yours, don't let the other agents distract you, get the blinders on and go get sales. And the combination of what Gary had laid out and how Lee helped us execute in those early years, I think started to create that foundation that I was able to learn in. And I've been fortunate enough, to have other great mentors, but those two being the two key pieces to really kind of set that as a standard. So I think now more than anything, as my leadership, I hope just not to screw that up. I was able to see the value that was created by having that
Yeah.
culture that Lee was able to really set. And we've had a lot of other really great leaders. We've been fortunate to be in business with great agents that helps that. But um, so I think, yes,
She's kind of a core. Yeah. Do you know, you'd find this funny because we invited Lee to be on here and her response was, "Well, I'm not that interesting." And I just kind of laughed because if anyone who knows Lee Stern, you hear her referred to as Colonel Stern, the
General.
Colonel,
General.
General, the General. That's right.
General.
I've always called her Mama Stern. Um, but it's super funny because anyone who knows her, right, she is one of the strongest mentors I know in
yeah.
my world. So it's funny because she thinks she has nothing interesting to contribute, but I agree with you. She's a powerhouse.
Yeah, and I have loved the real estate industry because so much of the learning is done through others. And so, again, we have a choice to rub shoulders or try to seek out people that have done more than us or are further along in the process. And, I was just fortunate to be exposed to many other great, talented people in the industry. Lee being one that, I've been a business partner with hers for, I think, 23 years now. So
Yeah.
I've had a up close look at that, and it's a good reminder for Mike and me and you to be thinking about, there are new people in the industry that are looking for that. They need that to be able to grow. And it's a good reminder for us to, be available. And we just don't know how much impact we're having on people. Like Lee may say that, but I mean, the amount of people she's impacted in this industry
Absolutely.
in Salt Lake is incredible.
Yeah. Super funny.
Yeah, I want to rewind the tape a little bit because you're a builder of things. You have created businesses, opportunities for other people, yet you started this part-time way back in the day, not knowing, if it was going to work out or not. I'm curious, when did was there a moment or when did you make that connection that, okay, not only could you do this as a salesperson, but there were scalable versions of, whether it be market centers or other business ventures? Like, was there a moment, or walk us through that?
A good question, Mike. I think it's a series of moments. So like almost for me, I've had to build confidence one level at a time. So like I could have said when I was 22, I'm going to own $100 million worth of real estate. And yet the way I was wired at the time is that felt like imposter syndrome. The first thing, as soon as I would say that, I'd say, you're too young. You're not from here. You don't even own your car outright right now. So, the doubts would creep in. So then I would have to get some confidence. And I remember when I bought my first duplex, probably 2 years into real estate, it was, I mean, $132,000, but I wanted it so bad. I had set a goal with my coach to buy an investment property by the end of the year. I'd already bought a house that I lived in. And I mean, I did everything I could. I was really focused. I'm very goal driven. So once I bought that property, um, that created some confidence that, hey, I can be a landlord. I can own some more real estate. So then I could think a little bigger. And the other thing is, Mike, early in my career, I started investing in coaches. And I think it's so important because coaches sort of believe in you before you believe in yourself. And so I was able to, through some different coaching relationships, throw out some sort of, they would push me and I would throw out some stretch goals. And they say, hey, you can do this. And here's a plan to help you do it. Let's go do it. And then they would hold me accountable to the activities that would get there. And the other thing is a good coach was able to remind me, hey, you've actually succeeded. You're progressing. Because the way my brain is wired, I'd get up every morning and say, there's still people in the office that are selling more houses than me, or people around here that own more real estate than me. So, I haven't arrived yet. And what I've learned over time is it's just like, it's a different step. Like, honestly, at different levels in my life, and it's nice to look back now and say, this has progressed mostly forward as far as growing my portfolio and my net worth and my earning ability, but it never felt like a straight line when I was doing it. I just kept doing it. And then once I got a little bit of confidence, let's say I was making 150 grand GCI or 200, and I had coaching and I was getting some confidence. I got exposed, or I would put myself in rooms like exposed to Tony Robbins or, Mike Ferry organization or different big thinkers, or would read books that would be like, wow, more is possible. And I always liked being around people that were more successful than me, agents that were doing more or business owners. Um, and so it's never been like one time where I thought, hey, I've arrived or I can go do this. It's like I have these different breakthroughs. For years, I had a goal of owning $10 million worth of real estate, and I had that written down and affirmed it. And I looked at it and I told anyone that cared that I was going to do that. And it probably took me 7 years to get to that goal the first time. And then I just made a bigger number. And then I worked on that number. I said it out loud. It was almost all my passwords and stuff. I've since changed them that I was going to own $25 million in real estate. Then I went to work every day, and because the goal was exciting enough for me, I would get up in the morning and keep moving forward, whether we were in a downturn in the market or I made bad decisions or things weren't working out. I would just keep, like your podcast, it's grinding, and it's just weird. All of a sudden you look up and you're like, wow, I'm actually making a lot of progress towards the goal. And I think that's important for people to keep exposing themselves and thinking about it, because when you're 20, whatever you desire for yourself will probably change a lot as you progress.
Yeah. Yeah. I think seriously, that's such an important item, Boyd, when you said that. If you talk to most entrepreneurs, there is never a point of which they've arrived, because what they're really happy in and where they find the joy is in the building. So once they hit the point they thought they were reaching for, they will just change and move the goalpost, right? Because the happiness and the fun is in the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the juice. And I mean, again, I feel bad. I do know some people that are like, okay, I'm where I'm arrived. I'm just gonna coast for the next 10 years. I think that would be just such a hard spot to be
Yeah.
in. No disrespect. Like if people are ready to retire and they're all ready to do it. But again, I've known some people that have just kind of gotten to a level and coasted, and I mean, the fun to me is in the pursuit, quite frankly.
Exactly. What would we do with ourselves once right? Like, what is coasting? What does that even look like?
And yet every week there's parts of the week where I'm like, crap, what am I doing all this stuff for? It doesn't last very long.
Because our spouses would kick us out if we were home that much.
That's true.
So switching gears, we always like to end with a couple of questions that we ask every guest. And I guess the first one is what book are you currently reading that's sort of sitting with you? Or is there a book, or has there been a book in the past that it's one that you either revisit or one that you would highly recommend?
That is a good question. I have quite a diverse interest. I usually have at least one business book, one spiritual book, and one fiction novel. Usually mystery and sort of police type of work going on at all times. But I would say the things that have had the most impact on my life and my career that I recommend to everybody is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Kiyosaki, Napoleon Hill, anything by Napoleon Hill, but just had some really early influence on that. It had a huge influence on me. And then Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, had a really big impact on me, and that's one that I go back and revisit quite often. And then recently, I've been really involved with this Dan Sullivan, my strategic coaching, and some of the things that have come out of there. But I think that 10X is easier than 2X with Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy has really made me think a lot about exponential growth. And then the two of them also collaborated on a book, Who Not How, which is some of the real principles of understanding what your unique ability is and connecting that the next step. Really, most of us get so caught up in all the how we're going to do that, the overwhelmed by all the tasks to go from where we are to where we're going to go. And in that book, it's just really genius. And we know this. It's like, if you think in terms of, okay, who's going to help me get there as opposed to how am I going to do all those steps? So just in the last couple of years, those two books, the 10X and Who Not How, have really been top of mind for me and the things that we've been working on inside of our organization primarily.
Yeah, good books.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is the amount of resources that we have with podcasts and things. It is amazing. When I first started to try to learn about development, I couldn't find information anywhere. It was like the information was all kind of hidden and it was hard to get to. Luckily I would get people to talk to me. But there's so many podcasts now, industry specific, and things on YouTube and I mean, there's just you can become an expert in almost any field. I mean, and I have probably 6 to 8 podcasts that I plug into from time to time that are development specific or real estate brokerage specific or sales specific. That, I mean, it's just so much information is available to us. I think none of us really have any excuse to stay stupid.
That's true. You got me thinking with all the resources we have at our disposal. What about AI? Where does AI fit into the world of Boyd Brown?
I've been really paying attention to it, and I'm not sure where it's weird where it goes, because I guess my one concern is how curated all of it could be. Like the same thing as with social media, like it becomes real directed. So I guess my only concern with AI is for me, one of my strengths is my creativity and to kind of be able to independently think and take information and formulate my own ideas. And I see that more and more AI is just basically, I mean, it's amazing how it can put information together for us. So I've been using it, researching it. I've surprised myself at some of how quickly, even like doing an analysis on a commercial lease deal, I was able to get information so much quicker doing it. So I love it. I think we're heading in the right direction. And yet the thing that I was on a soapbox this morning is everyone in a meeting had their AI guy and they're just recording it. I'm like, is anyone paying attention, or are you just pretending you're going to go back and listen to your AI thing? And so that's the one thing right now, like, are
Yeah.
we still have to have our brain engaged and stuff to be able to think about things. And so I'm like you and everyone else. I'm just curious. I know that we're right at the beginning of something that's going to change how every industry operates, and for us not to pay attention is crazy. But
Yeah.
I'm not completely converted. I have some of my contemporaries and friends that are so engaged. Their butt is so far up. Their head is so far into AI. I'm not sure they still remember some of the human experience, and that concerns me a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm basically pro AI, Mike, but cautiously
But
proceeding.
As
okay,
long as it's not a replacement for humans. I agree, right? It's what we do with it that makes it powerful. I don't think it's that the AI itself can replace our human capacity.
yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head in terms of, if you don't understand it and embrace it. Now, how much you use it is a different subject, but you've got to understand it and embrace it. Otherwise, I don't care what industry that we're in, like, we'll become dinosaurs, I think, real quick.
I'll mention one other book that was important that I think fits into the theme of your podcast is Darren Hardy had a book that he put out several years ago called, I think it's like The Accumulation Effect. And it just is, his whole theory is just do the right thing day after day after day, and it starts
Yeah.
stacking and building on it. And there's a thing such as momentum. And so if I make 10 prospecting calls today, I may not get a deal then, but if I do 10 prospecting calls every single day for 5 or 6 days, the universe is going to send me a deal. And it builds on itself. But if I only get up, and try it one day and go 7 days away from it, you just don't stack those things. And I thought his book was short enough. It had some diagrams, and it was a good strategy of convincing yourself to put the activities in every single day to get those rewards.
Yeah, that's a great one. Because that really is the grind, right? It's the willingness to show up and do the unsexy item every day that makes all the other pieces come into play. And that's a lot of it. I think that's where most people get stuck. We actually tell our loan officers as we're training them, you have to show up and you have to make those calls, right? We set a goal, X number of calls. We keep track of how many calls do they have to make to come up with an application, all those things. But like, you have to make all of those calls and you have to do that task every day for 30 days. But if you do that, it will come,
Yeah.
right? But it's hard to find people who can sit and do that thing every day.
And we have to be able to coach them like a good coach and just be like, have blind faith. Mike Ferry used to talk about repetitious boredom, and it's boring to do the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
Um, but man,
Except for it
that's
never
where
is
the
in our
magic is.
world, Boyd, because we're talking to people.
Yeah,
In real life, it's never boring. You meet some of the craziest characters.
that's true. That
So,
is true.
any other questions?
Well, yeah, last question. If when you think back, how you grew up or early in your business building career, was there an experience or a situation or something um, that sort of um, gave, I don't know, gives you that competitive advantage that you have now, sort of molded you into fast forward to where you're at today?
Yeah. Um, uh, Getting my butt kicked in 2008 and 2009 and being able to work through that. So we were riding high in April and shot down in May. Like things were really rolling. We were investing and turning things over. Everything I had touched on the brokerage side was growing, and it just seemed like I could do no wrong. I made was thinking that, like, I mistook catching a big wave by that I was a good swimmer.
Mm.
And so 2008 came and there was a lot of contraction, and I had plenty of warnings. I was in a mentor group of guys that were in California in different markets, and they're like, it's coming. I'm like, no, we're fine in Utah. Don't be such a nerd. I'm on the gas pedal, and just kept making decisions to move forward, even though there was a lot of evidence mounting that we were gonna get hit by a pretty big recession. And so I lost a couple of properties, had to lay some people off, but I took too long to do that. So I went through a lot of cash, had to sell some assets to get through it, and was a very hard time for us. And at a certain point, I think I owed the IRS a little over $250,000. I had, a couple of projects I'd worked on for 3 or 4 years go away. That's frustrating, and but I had a coach who was coaching me, and he said, you as the leader have got to show up. Your agents need you right now. I'm thinking, I need help. Like, I need someone to lead me out of this. I'm in a hole. And he's like, you got to show up. And when those agents come in and complain to you that they're short of their car payment, you don't mention at one point that you've lost over $1 million in the last 8 months. Like, that's not relevant to them. That's your problem. You need to be able to lead them. And I was fortunate to have that. And I just made the decision, we're going to work through this. If it's short sales, whatever it is. And I just showed up. I went into the office. I worked through my own stuff, but I was there for our guys. And that gave me the confidence that I can get through just about any setback, because it was a pretty big hole, and again, I don't wish that on anyone. I'm not proud of it. I don't brag about it. But the lessons that I learned from that were that, you can do hard things. Like you can, Mike, you can, Mandy, I can. And that's something I try to train all of our agents is, as long as you acknowledge where you are and are willing to start taking steps in the right direction. I mean, America is all about recovery, second chances, and our industry allows that. And yet, how many people in that same era just were completely mentally whipped and didn't have
Yeah.
the fight in them and wouldn't show back up to work? And so I was fortunate that that happened early enough in my career that it was just really valuable lessons that could help build confidence for me moving forward. So again, I don't wish to be in that position again, Michael, but I'm
Was
grateful
there
every
anything
day
that
that I've
helped
had
you?
that
Because
experience.
yeah, that's a hard moment, right? Was there anything that made it so that you could get out of bed and do it every single day? Was there anything that was,
Um,
what was your why in that era?
well, I was still pretty determined to own a bunch of real estate, and luckily I had some real estate so that it helped me through it. Again, I sold some assets, and again, being broke with assets is better than being broke without assets. I mean,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
another lesson. And so that helped me get through it. But honestly, Mandy, I mean, this'll, I mean, emotionally, it's, for my wife and kids. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to, I have a vision of what I want to be, for them, and quitter is not that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
So I think the why is that, you know, I had an idea of what, and again, it was modeled by family members of mine. You know, I saw some models of that, but that was my plan. I was gonna go, I was gonna get us through it, and it was gonna be a temporary deal. So my why was probably Kim, my wife, my kids,
Yeah.
and also just consummating the plan that I'd put in place that, you know, I want to go own a bunch of real estate. And the story didn't end with me crashing and burning because the market was down.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, let's put a bow on this because when people listen to this, they're inevitably going to look at the books that you've suggested. They're going to look up you. So where can they find you?
Crow Development, we have a website. You can Google us, Boyd Brown team. I think we've got it also, but I'm involved in any of the Keller Williams offices. If people want to reach out about a career in real estate, I'm happy to talk to them, or development, but that is the best way to reach us.
Cool. Man, what a privilege. I appreciate you. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. This was awesome. Can't wait for people to listen to it.
Much respect for what you guys are doing. And Mandy, you've been the most consistent loan officer. I've been able to see a lot of this in the industry. So I always just really acknowledge the hard work you put in for
Thank
a
you.
long time. That's terrific. And Mike, it's been, I just really feel blessed to be partners with you and be in business with you, and much respect for what you're doing in our industry. So thank you both.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
you.
you.